Welcome to this video on the top 10 werewolves of the Stargazers tribe from the tabletop role-playing game Werewolf the Apocalypse. The Stargazers largely walk a solitary path in pursuit of inner harmony, reflection, and moderation, and prefer to solve problems through wisdom rather than rage. But when battle is necessary, the Stargazers are fearsome enemies, given their strict discipline and mastery of the shape-shifting martial art Kailindo. But what truly distinguishes the Stargazers from their fellow Garou is that they have some rather unusual ideas about the War of the Apocalypse, specifically that the Garou's true enemy is not the worm, but the Weaver, putting them at odds with pretty much every other tribe. And that was before they abandoned the Garou nation at the end of the 20th century. But, without further ado, the top 10 werewolves of the Stargazers. Number 10. Klaital. The first Stargazer came from the east, near the end of the Impergium. Klaital looked on the wars between man against Garou, and Garou against Garou with despair, all because the Garou decided to take the easy route to human overbreeding and kill humans rather than teach them. Behind the chaos and suffering, Klaital saw another hand at work, the Weaver, who gave her chosen race, humanity, more powerful tools to protect themselves from the Garou. But the Weaver's gifts were tainted, as it spun a veil of ignorance around human minds, trapping them and shielding them from the truth of Gaia. Klaital contemplated the horror of the Weaver's workings and fell to Harano. But one Garou tells the story of Klaital's fall a bit differently. A Stargazer named Peter Cleartongue, claiming to have seen a vision of his past lives going back to Klaital's time, has stated, never to many other Stargazers, that Klaital did come from the east preaching peace and harmony between Gaia's creatures. But one day, while delivering a sermon, he came under attack by a group of primitive humans, armed with rocks and spears. Klaital was not a helpless observer, nor an impotent peacemaker, but rather his rage, suppressed for so long, erupted. Klaital led the slaughter of the foolish humans, the blood quenching his long-denied rage. Once Klaital came to his senses and cleansed himself of the gore, he returned to the east in shame, desperate to quench the inner fire of his rage with wisdom. So says Cleartongue, who may or may not be a reliable narrator to such ancient events, nor unbiased in his opinions of the tribe, but there it stands. Klaital, in the grip of Harano, went on a journey that is often recorded as a physical wandering, but was in fact a quest into the spirit world. His mind retread the path of his life, from joyful childhood to sly adulthood to bitter oldness. Through this journey he passed through the wastelands of his sorrowful heart, and at last reached the true spark of his being, the spark of Gaia that could not be altered by the machinations of the wild, weaver, or worm. With enlightenment, Klaital was no longer bound by false identity, nor the mistakes of his past. But most Garou were not prepared to receive enlightenment, so Klaital departed from them once again, with a small band of his followers. Klaital established a monastery, and was attended not only by Garou, but mortals, and even the awakened, who craved truth and understanding of the true Gaia realm. The worm, ensnared and maddened by the Weaver's webs, feared Klaital at the luminous shrine, and moved to destroy it. First, the worm sent its minions to destroy the shrine and its master. The gates were left open, for all were permitted to enter freely. The minions of the worm reached Klaital's meditation seat and prepared to strike down the wise Stargazer. But Klaital simply touched his heart, and the killers stopped, awed and shamed by a gesture of Gaia's pure love. Some fled, unable to bear Klaital's presence. Others fell to their knees and begged the teacher to show them the path of wisdom. So, the worm tried again, this time by dispatching two of its most subtle and clever servants to bring down the luminous shrine from within. The two honey-tongued monks questioned everything they were taught in the most insidious ways, spreading doubt and confusion within the shrine. Finally, Klaital confronted them himself. The two worm monks prepared in advance, and reasoned that they had to unseat the Stargazer's mind in advance or they would lose. So they asked Klaital, How do you know that your truth is not a lie?" But Klaital placed his hand on his belly and smiled. The two monks slunk away, defeated, and fearful to return in failure to the maw of the worm. The worm's final weapon, the most subtle and insidious, was a diseased beggar. The beggar sought food and healing for his sores, which Klaital gave him. The tainted beggar asked the master, "How can you spend your time with me alone, when others suffer the world over? What use is my healing when I will go gamble and whore my health away again? Others who cannot reach the shrine are more needy." Klaital was silent for a long moment of contemplation, then spoke, "Yes, my enemy, you are right. I had hoped to prepare a while longer, but my patience was a vanity. I will heed wisdom and send my monks out into the world." The beggar smiled, for he had succeeded where the others had failed. Each of Klaital's monks, his Stargazers, would go out into the world, alone and vulnerable. But then Klaital spoke again. "And so it is as Gaia meant it to be. No womb can hold an infant forever. All children must make their way in the world before they can return again to the womb. But in so doing, they will realize that they have brothers and sisters, and are never alone or without kin." Then the beggar began crying. His plan had succeeded, but with the Stargazers out in the world, they would cause more pain to the worm than they ever could if Klaital had kept them secluded at the luminous shrine. Klaital gathered his walking stick and pack, summoned his monks, and told them to leave the shrine, for within a month the walls would crumble. True to his word, 1 month later, without Klaital's Gnosis to keep them standing, the walls of the luminous shrine collapsed inward into ruins. This was the last any of the Stargazers would see of Klaital, at least in that form. But he would return, in another form, as another life, for he had freed himself from the snares the Weaver places on the souls of humans and Garou. Number 9. Serene Habhava. As Klaital passed from the world, the Stargazers rejoined the rest of their Garou brethren in their war against the worm. The first teacher taught that the worm was not only to be defeated physically, but mentally. Yet for all the Garou's martial prowess and valor, for all of the Stargazers' wise arguments, the worm's font of rage was as endless as its minions. In this time, a young Stargazer named Habhava did not simply undergo the rite of passage, he boasted knowledge and skill at a young age that it had taken elders a lifetime to master. The elders were suspicious of him, fearing him to be some trickster of the worm sent to bring them down from the inside. Habhava was further tested in all things, from combat to gamecraft to meditation. Yet Habhava passed them all, though barely a cub. Rather than ease the elders' minds, his success only convinced them further that Habhava was an infiltrator, so they surrounded him with fang and claw bared. And it was in this moment that Chimera, the tribal totem of the Stargazers, appeared in their midst, roaring like a lion and spouting flame like a dragon. When the elders were sufficiently cowed, Chimera sat down and explained to them that Habhava was in fact Klaital, reborn, with his wisdom and memories intact. Enlightened at the time of his death, Klaital returned to the womb of Gaia, the true Gaia realm, freed from all illusions and resting in peace. Yet in his dreams he saw the suffering of Gaia's children and felt deep sorrow for them. He decided to return so that he might remind his followers of wisdom. Klaital journeyed to the heart of the Gaia realm and pleaded with her to be reborn as a Garou. Chimera led him to that sacred place, for he is one of the few creatures who knows the path. It was in the heart of Gaia that he saw many of his friends and family, reclining in bliss. As tempting as it was to remain in that supernal realm, Klaital was resolute, for his compassion and his understanding of suffering would not allow him to remain at rest. And so, Klaital was reborn as Habhava. The elders fell to their knees and begged Habhava to teach them the path again, the way to attain perfection of the soul, to travel to the true Gaia realm, and return to the world as they wished. And so Habhava Klaital, also known as Serene Habhava, taught them again. Since his life and death, Many Stargazers have passed through many lifetimes as Garou of every tribe, even as humans and spirits, so that they might gain greater understanding. Subsequent Stargazers have come to the belief that Habhava was not Klaital himself, but a separate person, more enlightened than others, who became a vessel for Klaital's knowledge, a role that has been carried by approximately 989 Stargazers throughout history. Some sages believe that Klaital's other traits, wisdom, understanding, speech, and compassion, have incarnated similarly in others as well. Number 8. Fierce Chakal. Many years after Habhava's time on Earth, the doctrines of the Stargazers radically changed. The Stargazers puzzled at how to diffuse the great anger of the worm of corruption, and many Stargazers journeyed through the spirit realms to learn its secrets. But it was a Stargazer named Chakal, an incarnation of one of Klaital's first disciples, who discovered the truth. The worm was a prisoner of the Weaver, and it raged, mindlessly, in a desperate hope for escape. It goaded and provoked the Garou, so that they would turn their claws and fangs against the webs that bound it. But the Weaver's webs were too subtle for the Garou, so they raged against themselves, each other, and humanity. Chakal concluded that the only way to defeat the Weaver's webs was through the mind, specifically, a mind that could twist itself through the gaps in the Weaver's web. A mind capable of disciplined madness, sane insanity, mastery of paradox, and enigma. Only a mind capable of defeating all enigmas could stop the Mad Weaver. Chakal also realized that the worm seeded madness in its followers for the same reason, to immunize them against the madness of the Weaver called clarity. Yet only a being that reached its star soul, its pure incorruptible shard of Gaia at its core, could journey to the heart of the worm's mad realm without destroying itself. And so, the worm's servants will destroy creation, if only to frustrate the Weaver's desires. Chakal feared that eventually the Garou might be corrupted to the worm's service, a fear that was realized when the White Howlers fell to the Black Spiral many centuries later. During her life, fierce Chakal walked the spirit realms, slicing through the webs of the Weaver with her clave, the Vajra, a blade so sharp that it could cut ignorance and illusion from the minds of the deceived and leave the flesh untouched. She taught the Stargazers who their true enemy was, the jailer of not only the worm, but of all living things. When she died, Chakal ascended to the realm of gods, becoming a Morihei, or Wisdom Queen, a fierce guardian deity, a protector of wisdom, destroyer of ignorance, and a restorer of the cosmic balance. Number 7. Boroghul the Mad. Boroghul was born in 1112 AD to a Mongol tribe. When he grew to adulthood, he served as a healer to the powerful Taichigut tribe and a theurge of the Stargazers tribe. Though he was trained at arms, he was not a warrior, at least not at first. His place was to bind wounds and speak with the spirits, and he was content in his place. Boroghul reached Poland with his warriors sometime in his middle years. As was the custom of his people, he brought along a young woman he was betrothed to from the Arulad tribe. One day, when the men were out scouting, the women and children were nearly wiped out by a mysterious plague. When the men returned, they too contracted the disease. Thanks to his Garou physiology, Boroghul survived, though his bride did not. This was the beginning of his descent into madness. Boroghul abandoned the path of the healer for the ways of war. His mind twisted to believe that the plague had somehow been engineered by the people of Europe. Fury grew in his heart as he began to see all forms of civilization as tainted by the Weaver. Even the technology of his own people, the saddle and the bow, provoked him. By the end, Boroghul called himself the Batajikan, the mythical founder of the Mongol people, 1/3 man, 1/3 demon, and 1/3 wolf. Eventually, he rejected the Mongols as Weaver-tainted. Everywhere he looked, he saw the binding, suffocating webs of the Queen Maker. Then, one day, Boroghul fled into the Umbra and disappeared. Boroghul has since reincarnated several times, and each manifestation has supported the Trappist faction of the Stargazers tribe, dedicated to overcoming the Weaver, by whatever means necessary. Number 7. Dr. Leopold Valkenburg. Leopold Valkenburg was a stargazer born sometime in the late 19th century. At university, Valkenburg studied medicine, philology, and philosophy, attaining degrees in all three fields before he even underwent the first change. Afterwards, he became one of the earliest proponents and practitioners of psychoanalysis. Valkenburg was very likely a student at Jena in Thuringia, Germany. After a successful career of study and research at the university, Valkenburg moved to Switzerland to open a private practice focused on a particular clientele. For a Garou, the first change is a painful, terrifying moment, especially for the unprepared. But some Garou, through sheer strength of will and a helpful amount of denial, can physically resist the first change, remaining as they were. But though the change in body was resisted, the change in mind cannot be. These unfortunate, failed Garou have been subsequently branded as lunatics, and have suffered, at the hands of humans, as many sufferers of mental illness have throughout history, or even at the claws of the Garou, who regard lunatics as having been too weak and cowardly to change. In 1913, Valkenburg met with his first patient, Jacob Hargest. Hargest was a lunatic who had been committed to an asylum in Jena the previous year, after years of launching into fits of madness beneath a full moon and having nightmares about being abducted by beasts from the forest. He was released into the custody of Dr. Valkenburg for treatment. Through a combination of psychotherapy and by a controlled revelation of his true form to Hargest, Valkenburg was able to cure the lunatic and guide him beyond his repressed first change into becoming a true Garou. Valkenburg then arranged for the children of Gaia to take custody of Hargest and determine his tribe and auspice. But en route to meeting the children of Gaia, Valkenburg and Hargest were surrounded by the wolves of the Red Talons, who regard lunatics as tainted and worthy of only extermination. Before the Talons' leader, Dark Blood Gushing, could call for an attack, Valkenburg challenged him, a duel that the Red Talon had no choice but to accept. Valkenburg demonstrated that he was not only skilled in matters of the mind, but in combat. Dark Blood Gushing, with Valkenburg's jaws at his throat, had no choice but to yield. A few moments later, the children of Gaia came rushing forth and chased off the Red Talons. Hargest, before leaving with them, swore that he was eternally in Dr. Valkenburg's debt. Valkenburg continued with other patients, some humans, others lunatics. His final case in Switzerland was that of a Prussian nobleman named Baron von Kulk. Valkenburg used a variety of techniques to break through von Kulk's stubbornness and Prussian self-consciousness to get to the heart of his fear of wolves chasing him through a forest, his ancestral castle just out of reach, the dream ending as the wolves catch him. Finally, Valkenburg led von Kulk into the Umbra, into the dream world that haunted him. This was the doctor's mistake. Valkenburg went to scout out the castle in the Baron's dream. There, he found a being of pure shadow, a creature that preyed on fear and doubt. It claimed to lay at the heart of all lunatics, of those who repressed their inner wolf, locked it away until it drove them mad in return. The spirit of lunacy tried to attack Valkenburg with his own childhood fear, a fear of the father who whipped him without compassion or reason. But Valkenburg had long ago mastered his own fear, and the spirit, terrified of the Krynos-formed Stargazer before it, fled in search of easier prey, the Baron. The Baron, possessed and his Garou nature unlocked, began to transform right inside of Valkenburg's office. Valkenburg led the possessed Baron through the streets into the woods to avoid a battle in the city, where he could safely deal with the deranged Baron. But when they reached the woods, the Baron suddenly went silent, followed by the sounds of a melee. Valkenburg turned to see the Baron, lying on the ground bleeding, as the Red Talons attacked their own leader, Dark Blood Gushing, who had unwittingly become the spirit's new host. Valkenburg stepped sideways once again to confront the spirit in its realm, but the shadow stopped and released Dark Blood Gushing from its control. The spirit promised that it would elude Valkenburg's attempts to best it, and then strike the doctor when he was at his weakest. Then the spirit disappeared. Valkenburg stepped back into the world and assessed the damage. Baron von Kolk lay on the ground in Hamid form, catatonic. The red talons licked their wounds. Dark blood gushing, wounded grievously, managed to stare at the doctor with eyes of utter hatred, as he promised revenge against Valkenburg, no matter how long it took. Valkenburg took the Baron to the asylum and signed the commitment papers himself. The Baron was unlikely to ever recover. Meanwhile, Valkenburg began making plans to leave Switzerland and Europe for North America. After some scouting and introductions, Valkenburg opened a new asylum on a ranch in Wyoming and dubbed the place the Valkenburg Foundation. His first alliance was with the Pure Heart Sept, who regarded Valkenburg as a savior for many of the lunatics given birth by the Wendigo. Valkenburg tirelessly treated them all, whether Hamid or lupus born, until he ran out of patients in the local area to treat. He cast about America, sending young packs of Garou to find more lunatics in need of help. Near the end of the 1930s, Valkenburg was killed by one of his patients, possibly at the behest of Valkenburg's old enemy, the Shadow. The lunatic escaped the ranch and was never seen again. Valkenburg's assistants soon shut down the foundation and moved away to the nearby towns. In the 1980s, Leopold Valkenburg's kinfolk daughter, Gretchen Valkenburg, revived the foundation to continue Leopold's work. Number 5. Thunder Tiger. The Lupus Arun Stargazer Thunder Tiger was born in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. His first change was a painful and confusing time for him. Luckily, a theurge named Windsinger heard the cub's cries and gave him shelter in his mountain hideaway. Windsinger began teaching Tiger how to control his shape-changing and trained him. The meeting between Thunder Tiger and Windsinger was not an accident. Windsinger saw a vision that Thunder Tiger had a great destiny waiting for him. Windsinger then gave Thunder Tiger over to Sharpened Breeze for training in Kailindo. It was Sharpened Breeze who gave Tiger his name, in recognition of his dexterity, his ability to concentrate and channel his rage. Since completing his training, he bears a scar in lupus form in the shape of a tiger, marking him as a disciple of the East Wind School of Kailindo. Meanwhile, Windsinger's pack, the Ghost Raptors, made preparations to journey to the Amazon in service to a werewolf known only as the White Father. Thunder Tiger asked to join his mentor and was accepted into the Ghost Raptors pack. The Ghost Raptors are a mixed pack of various tribes and breeds who have taken Uktena, the water serpent, as their pack totem and aligned themselves with the native Garou of South America, as well as the mysterious Balam, were-jaguars. In fact, Thunder Tiger defeated one of the Balam in battle when the Ghost Raptors first met them, a misunderstanding that was eventually smoothed over, though Thunder Tiger was rewarded twice. First, by being named chief bodyguard of the White Father, and second, his defeated enemy taught him to use the gift of Shriek, that deafens allies and enemies alike within the sound of the gift user's voice. Thunder Tiger is fanatically devoted to the White Father and will do anything to protect him. It is this loyalty that has made his rapid advancement in the Ghost Raptors possible, but it may also be his downfall when the White Father finally succumbs to the toxic radiation and waste he has been exposed to in the war against Pentex. In the meantime, when Thunder Tiger is not protecting the White Father or waging war against the Worm's minions, he maintains a secret romance with the silent strider named Steps Lightly, a member of Roshan One-Arm's pack, and part of the ward commanded by the Fenrir war chief of the Amazon, Gogol Fangsfirst. Number 4. Galileo Crosses the Stars. Galileo was born on July 20th, 1969, on Mount Pisgah in North Carolina. His father was a stargazer by the name of Siddhartha Travels with Beauty, and his mother was a changeling, specifically an Eshu named Amina, one of the nomadic storytellers of the Fae. Galileo was educated in the histories of both the Garou and the Fae, as his parents weren't sure which legacy would manifest in him. They were always on the move. Every city, town, and holler, another stop on the family's pilgrimage for knowledge and new stories. During one stay in eastern Kentucky, they ran afoul of some locals in a flea speck of a town. Now, Siddhartha was vaguely Asiatic-looking thanks to generations of interbreeding between the Stargazers of Tibet and the peoples of Europe and North America. Amina's mortal seeming was that of a woman with African and Native American features, and Galileo, by that time a teenager, had the looks of both of his parents. Some of the men of the town didn't take too kindly to this mixing of the races, if only they knew, and attacked the family with whatever weapons they had to hand. Siddhartha, for the first time in years, shifted into Krynos form. This also caused Galileo to undergo the first change right then and there. Father and son killed most of their assailants, but not before the mortals clubbed Amina to death with a tire iron. The two howled their grief to the night, then carried Amina away to bury her where she would always be able to see the stars. Siddhartha then told Galileo about the full horror of his mother's death. Iron is anathema to the Fey soul. For a changeling to die from its touch obliterates the changeling's soul. Amina's spirit would never return to the world, nor would she ever find peace in the dreaming. Galileo and Siddhartha continued to wander the mountains in sorrow. The father taught his son everything he knew about the Stargazers, their tribe, and the pair eventually made their way to Tibet, where Galileo could be properly trained in the disciplines and mysteries of the tribe, as well as find some anodyne for his wounded spirit. When Galileo prepared to return to America, Siddhartha told his son that he intended to live out the rest of his years in Tibet, among his people. There was nothing left for him in the world that had taken Amina from him. But Galileo returned to North Carolina and the mountains to seek out the other half of his heritage, the Ishu, or any changeling who would speak to him. He visited the sept of the Moon's Blessing in Cumberland Falls, Kentucky. During his time there, Galileo witnessed a rare moonbow over the falls. The sight of the faint refractions of light over the waterfall at night fascinated him, and he decided to stay. In time, Galileo became the sept's master of the challenge. His tribe's penchant for riddles and Kailindo ensured that the Stargazer could always come up with an inventive but fair way to settle disputes between members of the sept. When not attending his duties, Galileo journeys throughout Appalachia, searching for the changelings and perhaps some peace with his mother's death. Number 3. Morihei High Mountain. One of the only two Stargazers in the whole of New York, Morihei High Mountain lived much of his life ignorant of his Garou heritage. Before his first change, he excelled in his studies, earned a doctorate, and became a world-renowned thoracic surgeon, as well as a husband and father. It was when his life seemed perfect that everything came crashing down around him, washed away in a tidal wave of rage that he had kept suppressed for so long. By the time he came to his senses, his wife and daughter were dead, slain by his own hand. Morihei fled in a panic and would have taken his own life if he had not wandered into Central Park and the Sept of the Green. The Bonar Theurge, Mother Larissa, found the suffering Morihei and enlightened him as to what he had become, and that despite the tragedy he had endured, a great fate awaited him. After dwelling in the Sept of the Green for a time, Morihei journeyed alone from America to Tibet, climbed the Himalayan mountains until, ragged and near death, he reached the gate of Shilgalu Monastery. Some Stargazers claim that Morihei actually died there, in the snow, and that the Stargazer elders resurrected him, but this is just a tale. He was, however, accepted into the Sept of the Snow Leopard and instructed in the mysteries of the tribe, as well as the art of Kailindo. His dedication and focus were so great that Lung Tak, leader of the monastery and sept, took Morihei as his personal disciple. But monastic life was not for Morihei. Eventually he took up the path of the wandering adventurer. Since he departed Tibet, he has traveled the earth and the Umbra, fighting the worm's minions single-handedly. Several of his accomplishments are memorialized in the Silver Record, and he is well on his way to becoming a legend, not just of his tribe, but the entire Garou nation. But if Morihei is driven ever forward, it is because looking back on what he has lost is simply too painful to bear. Number 2. Bright Moon Shadow. 50 years ago, a Metis Garou was born to two exiled Stargazers who abandoned the path of enlightenment for the sake of their selfish lusts. Bright Moon's shadow was the product of it. His parents, as far fallen as they were, dumped the newborn Krynos in a Calcutta alley with the trash to die of exposure and starvation. But the child survived, despite the elements, parasites, and scavengers. A mixed pack of bone gnars and stargazers discovered the child, led to the place where he had been discarded by a chimerling. The spirit told them that a holy child had been left to die. The Metis child was completely hairless, with a port wine birthmark that divided one half of his body from the other. His disfigurement was seen as a blessing by the pack, indicative of the yin and yang contained in his body. They took him to the arm of Kolkata north of the city and gave him the name Bright Moon's Shadow. Among humans, he is known as an East Bengal refugee named Kasba Jabardakal. As Kasba, a name he prefers, he protects the casteless, feeds them, builds villages, and fights off Pakistani rebels. In time, Bright Moon's Shadow became an elder in his own right, and struggled with ordering the various factions of the small, fractured Stargazers tribe, mainly the Transcendentalists who believed the tribe needed no unified direction, and the Trappists who called for all-out war against the Weaver and its minions, specifically humanity. Bright Moon's Shadow acted as an unofficial enforcer within the tribe, hammering out disputes, and when needed, hammering heads. With the fall of Shagalu Monastery and the refusal of the Western Garou to aid the Stargazers in the east, Bright Moon's Shadow began secret negotiations with the beast courts of the Emerald Mother for admission of the Stargazers into their ranks. When the time came, he was the driving force to, let's say, persuade the other Stargazers into joining what became known as the Homecoming. He was also the one who announced at the constellation of the Garou that the Stargazers intended to leave. Unfortunately, the Stargazers haven't exactly received a hero's welcome in the Beast Courts. While they are not treated with open disdain, the Stargazers have reported that they are quietly regarded as junior members of the Beast Courts, and will have to prove themselves worthy of full membership in whatever way that might be. Bright Moon's Shadow now regards the Homecoming with regret, and wonders if he made a mistake in his haste. Are not East and West both parts of Gaia? It would cause him great personal shame to seek a reversal of the move he championed, and it might not matter anymore. The Garou nation might not welcome the Stargazers back, just as the Beast Courts may not accept any withdrawal or alteration of the Stargazers' new membership. For now, Bright Moon's Shadow is resigned to patience, but his patience is wearing thin. Number 1. Antonine Teardrop. Antonine was born in 1945, a Hamid Philodox who has the distinction of being only one of 2 Stargazers in the entire state of New York, the other being Morihei High Mountain, and Antonine is one of the last elders of the tribe to remain in the Garou nation after the Stargazers seceded and joined the Beast Courts. Most of his formative years were unknown. To humans, Antonine Teardrop is a solitary astronomer and woodsman. He lives at an observatory in the Catskill Mountains, fitted with various telescopes and other more esoteric devices that chart the stars and predict certain possible futures. Among kinfolk and Garou, Teardrop is an astrologer who gives consultations on their chances for success based on the movements of the heavens. In the course of Antonine Teardrop's stargazing and journeys into the Umbra, he saw that the worm is a creature more akin to a hydra, and it was a hydra sprouting a new head, made up of the faces of screaming children. At the time, he did not know the meaning of this vision, but came to believe that the beast could not be defeated by fang and claw. Instead, he proposed to the other Garou of New York that they hold a great revel, one in which all of the Garou would join together, present their grievances to one another openly, ask for forgiveness from one another, and most importantly, accept that forgiveness. Needless to say, this did not go over very well with the other tribes. Even the children of Gaia were a little leery of the success of such a radical plan. One of Antonine Teardrop's longtime friends was the exiled Silverfang prince Jonas Albrecht. After Albrecht's defeat at the hands of Arcade Iceclaw, Antonine joined Albrecht's quest for the Silver Crown. Teardrop's mastery of the shape-shifting martial art Kailindo was especially useful. By the end, Albrecht became king of the North Country Protectorate, and Antonine became one of the king's most trusted advisors. But he was as surprised as many other Garou when the other Stargazers were instructed to drop whatever they were doing, abandon septs and packs, and return to the homeland that many of them never knew, as the tribe abandoned the west for the east. Antonine wasn't certain of the plan. He understood the Asian Stargazers' frustration with the other Garou, and respected the courage it took to leave everything behind for the unknown. But he also believed that the Stargazers were essentially running away from the duty they owed to their fellow Garou. Antonine journeyed to Tibet, India, and China, listened respectfully to the ideas and plans of the elders, and then returned home to America, thoroughly unconvinced. As an elder in his own right, Antonine is still regarded by his tribe with cool respect. Many think him foolish, but none believe that he is a traitor, at least, not yet. The Garou regard him with suspicion and derision. His mastery of Kailindo and his friendship with King Albrecht are the only things that have protected him from those who demand that the Stargazers suffer the same fate as the Bunyip. Aside from being an unwilling spokesman for his tribe in the west, Antonine struggles to unravel the riddle of the Red Star, called the Eye of the Worm by some Garou, that appeared in the sky of the Umbra in the aftermath of the Week of Nightmares. Antonine believes that if he discovers the true purpose of the Eye, he may win some advantage for the Garou in the War of the Apocalypse, or perhaps, if he's lucky, avert the apocalypse entirely. And those were the top 10 werewolves of the Stargazers. The tagline of Werewolf the Apocalypse is, "When will you rage?" But the Stargazers go, "Nah, we'd actually rather not." I said this at the start of the video, but the Stargazers' opposition to the Weaver rather than the Worm is what makes them an interesting tribe, because they're not wrong. After all, but for the Weaver, the Worm would still be a creature of balance, rather than corruption. And the next tribe has similarly heterodox views on the Weaver, the Worm, and how best to deal with them both. Whether it is by understanding where possible, slaying where necessary, and binding when the first two fail. Coming up next, the top 10 werewolves of the Uktena. Until next time.